Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we continue to break down the Trevor Lawrence contract extension that was announced on Thursday afternoon. 5 years, $275 million, and this number definitely caught a lot of people off guard based off of the fact that he is being paid up with, the what we see as premier performing quarterbacks in the NFL. And again, as much as you might believe in Trevor Lawrence, and I know that I personally do, he hasn't necessarily put it all out on the field yet to show that he is worth that type of money. But this is, I think, a contract that is being thrown out there for the idea of in time he will be able to live up to this. So the clock is definitely on for Lawrence, who had a down season last year, dealt with some injuries, but ultimately, again, being known as one of the best prospects coming into the league in recent history, he is going to have the pressure on him this season. The Jaguars have done plenty, I would say, to put the talent around him necessary for him to thrive. But with Lawrence getting this type of a deal, and again, matching what Joe Burrow is currently getting in the NFL, and we just saw Jared Goff as well a month ago get a deal for $53 million a season. It does definitely also, as much as Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff have pressure to perform up to these standards, the most pressure is on these other NFL franchises that have decisions to make at the quarterback position regarding whether or not they should be paying their guys. There are 3 teams right now who have quarterbacks that are still eligible for contract extensions with some big names attached to it. The Cowboys with Dak Prescott, the Packers with Jordan Love, and the Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa. Now, all of these are interesting cases because, again, if you look at Goff and Lawrence, we are not saying by any means that these are flawless quarterbacks in the league today, but it's an idea on a little bit what they can provide the franchise for the next handful of years. And as I say that out loud, yes, I understand that's what the majority of contracts are, but it's obviously just so much more heightened at the quarterback position, where we know in today's NFL is far and away the most important. It's extremely hard to succeed if you don't have a quarterback, but also if your quarterback isn't the player that's worth paying all of this money, you can be very badly handicapping yourself for years to come. Now, when we have this conversation, the number one player that people are going to look to is Dak Prescott because he's on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm sure everybody here has heard plenty of Cowboys discussion throughout this offseason. My quick notes, though, are that it does feel like the Cowboys are sort of most, I don't know if you want to say at fault or ultimately just waiting out this long. They are kind of the biggest loser in this situation with the inflation of the quarterback salary cap market, because Dak Prescott is coming off of the best season of his career. He was an MVP candidate. I believe he made second team All-Pro as well. And knowing that he was going to be asking for a lot of money, when he spoke to reporters in mid-April, he said that he didn't necessarily want to become the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, that he just wanted to find himself a fair deal. And I guess the idea before was that the Cowboys could sort of play these games with Prescott and try and convince him that whatever money he's looking for of the $50+ million, that wasn't going to be available to him in free agency. And now we've seen with Jared Goff getting $53 million and Trevor Lawrence getting $55 million per year, both of these players, I mean, Jared Goff now has at least led the Lions to an NFC championship. I don't think he's to blame for the collapse of a loss in the NFC championship game. But, overall, I guess this is more so for Lawrence than it is for Goff. But still, at the same time, if you're talking about upside, I feel like Goff is probably third on that list. The point being, Dak Prescott is going to believe that he is better than both of these players who just got paid. And he's going to see there absolutely is money for me available. And you can even go to Kirk Cousins in free agency, who is going to be 36 years old next season, coming off of a torn Achilles, and he just got a deal for $45 million per year. So that bargaining chip, or at least tactic from the Cowboys of you aren't going to be able to get that money when you hit the open market, Dak Prescott is easily going to point to these other examples and call BS on that. And it puts a lot of pressure on the Cowboys, again, going back to those reports that Dak wasn't necessarily looking to become the highest paid quarterback earlier this offseason. But now, again, the pressure is on for the Cowboys, and I don't see really a world in which they make this work. Now, I've argued in the past, and I still stand by it, I don't know what the Cowboys are without Dak Prescott. Is he a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the league? No. But he also is vastly better than any other options that are available to them right now. And unless you think that Trey Lance is going to, become a star out of nowhere, years of sitting on the bench dealing with injuries, or that they're going to be willing to just sort of go into, I wouldn't say a full rebuild, maybe a little bit more of a retooling, but they're not going to be Super Bowl contenders if they just let Dak Prescott walk in free agency. But I also don't really see a way in that they are going to be willing to give Dak Prescott $55+ million per year and also be able to hold on to CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, who are both also available for contract extensions. I've said in the past, again, that I would probably lean towards moving CeeDee Lamb. I believe you can easily get at least one first-round pick for him, plus other assets as well. So that would be my preference if I were in the Cowboys position. But ultimately, again, it's a very tough financial situation dealing with your 3 best players all looking for contracts at the same time. But, that being said, I just talked about everyone's heard enough about the Cowboys, and I gave my 2 cents on the Cowboys once again. But it's interesting for Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa, also 2 players that do have upside, first-round draft pedigree as well in recent years, but at the same time, there is still a large unproven with these guys. Jordan Love, I was a big fan of this past year, even when they weren't necessarily winning the games in the beginning of the season. I still thought that Jordan Love, when it came to those final moments, was able to put together some pretty big drives. I look at the Saints game in particular that he played in. I thought that he was excellent down the stretch of that one, and even when the overall numbers weren't necessarily showing greatness, I thought that he showed a number of things. The fact that he didn't have a solidified number 1 wide receiver, but he was dealing with a ton of youth talent in the receiving core with his wide receivers and his tight ends, the majority of them taken in the past couple drafts. He just did an excellent job of spreading the ball across the field, and it's something that, again, I believe in Jordan Love. Now, after this sort of small sample size, again, when you look at Trevor Lawrence getting $50 million, and Jordan Love just took a team-friendly deal, I believe it was last offseason when he signed it, as opposed to playing under the typical 5th-year option for a first-round quarterback. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting conversation to see how much Jordan Love is willing to, I think that the Packers, ultimately, a very, very young team, are probably going to be looking to dish out the money, and I ultimately think that would be the right decision. But I don't know. I don't necessarily have, unwavering confidence in him necessarily just yet, at least. Tua, I have never been super high on necessarily. If I were the Dolphins, I would sort of wait to make Tua actually prove it to you, because I don't know if we've even seen the upside that Jordan Love has showed yet up to this point. But another interesting conversation coming into this is how does this affect Brock Purdy, who isn't eligible for a contract extension until next year, but it is a very strange situation where you're talking about two different quarterbacks who have extremely different experiences up to this point in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence was seen as the golden boy coming into the league and that he was going to be the savior for Jacksonville, and he has had his flashes, his moments like I talked about, but ultimately the overall level of production hasn't been where we thought it was going to be up to this point in his career. And, you know, there are various reasons as to why. We went over that in the first segment, but ultimately the Jaguars decide to pay him because of what they think he can be. Brock Purdy, on the other hand, came in with no expectations. The majority of NFL fans didn't know who he was, being selected in the 7th round, last overall pick, and he has done nothing but lead the 49ers to wins since then. Now, obviously, he plays in a quarterback-friendly system and such, and you can definitely use that against him to the point where he has had so much success, and yet he still does have doubters. But at the same time, when you look at the situation for the 49ers, who have gone out and paid big money to Jimmy Garoppolo, they moved draft capital to go up and select Trey Lance with the 3rd overall pick in 2021. None of those really panned out to consistent winning until Brock Purdy stepped into the mantle and took over for the 49ers. So we still have another year here of Brock Purdy to play out and see how that goes. But I do think that this is a deal that we're going to be looking back at to some degree. Obviously, will be another year in the future. The quarterback market is bound to be reset to at least some degree a year from now. But it is really interesting to see how this is all going to play out. Because, again, ultimately, Lawrence has proven very little in the NFL so far. And, again, I like him. But he just got this massive deal matching a Joe Burrow contract when Burrow took the Bengals to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Lawrence hasn't come anywhere close to that level of winning success yet. And I do believe that it's in him. And again, I defend the Jaguars for making that signing, but that's where it does sort of have this domino effect on the other quarterback contracts in the NFL. We do have a comment from Lil Fettuccini about, is Dallas winning tonight, in reference to the Dallas Mavericks. We're going to be doing a whole segment on the Mavericks in a few minutes here. My brief thoughts would be, I do think that the Mavericks have a very good chance tonight. Now, that being said, coming all the way back only to fall apart in those final couple minutes in a very emotional way as well, with Luka Doncic fouling out, you can make an argument from, on one hand, they did earn that comeback up to that point, and it was the Celtics playing bad. Maybe there's something there to expose, but at the same time, the way that was a heartbreaker, that was the Celtics showing their vulnerability, that they were looking ahead a little bit too much of, they got caught up in the moment, we have a chance to win this championship. And the fact that they were able to rein it back in and come away with that win, Joe Mazzulla has this quote that's going viral a little bit that's ridiculous. The Celtics head coach, that is, talking about the closer you are to winning, the closer you are to losing, and this whole idea of making yourself vulnerable because you're comfortable. But I think that the Celtics showed that already a little bit in Game 3, and the Mavericks weren't able to capitalize. But again, we're going to get into a whole segment on Dallas in a few minutes here, but we're going to be taking a quick break, and before we dive into that, we have another 3-0 playoff series right now in the finals in the NHL, with the Panthers. Also, you can make some comparisons to how Celtics-Mavs Game 3 played out. The Panthers were able to hold off a late-game comeback against the Oilers and take this commanding series lead. So we're going to be breaking down that game and where we stand in that series as well. So stick with us, and we will dive into all of that after this quick break. Don't go anywhere.